West Virginia is still waiting on a game-changing $84 billion investment from China that was Washington bottom, WVU Beijing build as you rolling out the red carpet for an unprecedented private dinner in the Forbidden City, marching a military parade through Tiananmen Square, and hosting a signing ceremony in the colossal Great Hall of the People to unveil. 1/3 of that value was supposed to flow to West Virginia, an energy-rich but high-poverty state whose manufacturing and energy workers handed Trump his widest margin of victory in 2016. He captured more. Under the deal, China's largest state-owned energy giant would spend nearly $84 billion over 20 years to build facilities that extract natural gas and turn it into byproducts that generate power and make consumer goods. In celebrating the announcement, West Virginia officials said projects would be underway within a year. A month later, government Jim Justice but skepticism about the deal surfaced almost immediately. Officials referenced CNBC interviewed dozens of local executives, state officials, and federal lawmakers about where the deal stands. What emerges is 18 months after the deal was announced with much fanfare, China Energy Investment Corp. has spent no money in West Virginia's energy projects, Justice tells CNBC. Thrasher Yuan of delegations from China Energy Investment Corp. and Shenhua Group, its parent company, embarked on multiple learning tours in West Virginia to figure out where they would invest. In addition to visiting, local executives and state lawmakers expected China Energy to assist in building new facilities in 3 areas: natural gas burning power plants, steam crackers that turn gas into ethylene, and an underground reservoir that would store the excess energy until it could be processed or traded. The goal, according to those involved, invest in the infrastructure to extract and process the raw materials and send the materials themselves back to China. But problems arose soon after the deal's announcement. China's involvement in the power plants was blocked by U.S. officials, who raised national security concerns about an adversary obtaining operating knowledge of a state's power grid. The source of the opposition with the federal government was not clear, but Thrasher and Republic. David McKinley, by We Energy Solutions Consortium, the U.S.-based company building the power plants in Brooke and Harrison counties, says permits for the plants are in process, and their construction is not predicated on Chinese investment. 800 miles away from the power plant sites sits an empty asphalt lot on the banks of the Ohio River that was supposed to host the facility that would crack the area's abundant natural gas into ethylene. A security guard, when asked where one would find the cracker or the beginnings of it, the security guard returned a quizzical stare. That's. Local executives, who requested anonymity because they are not authorized to discuss the project, say China Energy's interest was piqued by the waterfront location and neighboring logistics hubs that would allow the company to easily export what it produced back to Beijing. China's financial backing would have added momentum to the cracker's long-stalled production. Its construction by Brazil's petrochemical company Braskem, and Braskem's parent company, Odebrecht SA, had been on hold for years amid a corruption scandal, financial troubles, and ownership questions. Odebrecht's chief, the Department of Energy, says the cracker would produce 1 million annual tons of ethylene, a petrochemical product used to make zip-close bags and clothing fibers. But the earliest then there's the Appalachia Storage and Trading Hub, currently in the fundraising and development phase. Steve Hedrick, the majority of the funding $1.9 billion is expected to come from a Department of Energy loan. The remaining what? Hedrick maintains that Beijing never made a firm commitment to fund the construction of the hub, despite his joining West Virginia officials in China to announce the $83.7 billion deal. His participation, lawmakers say the storage hub was always on China Energy's shortlist. The potential value of the China energy deal is greater than the value of everything the state of West Virginia produces in a year, which according to the Street Louis Federal Reserve it. West Virginia's current Commerce Secretary, Ed Gonch, told a West Virginia radio show the investment would produce hundreds. A spokesperson for Gonch and the West Virginia Department of Commerce declined repeated requests for comment from CNBC over a 3-month period. The proposed size of the investment and availability of those projects has lawmakers and longtime West Virginia drillers scratching their head. Dennis Sonder, president of West Virginia-based Dynex Petroleum, said even if China Energy fully paid for every pipeline under construction in the state, it would only be able to spend about $25 billion. Dynex and Matrix have not encountered any Chinese bidders participating in existing or future projects where their companies are involved, the two executives said. Pedrick, who was briefed on the investment as part of the 2017 trip, said the specificity of the figure indicated it was the amount China truly intended to spend. Thrasher, the former state commerce secretary, says the math was done quickly in late 2017, with the The White House declined to comment on its role in assembling the deal or President Trump's discussions about it with Governor Justice. Shortly after, the U.S. Department of Commerce, which arranged the deals and the delegations, says it is still working on the agreement but acknowledged its outcome is unclear. The deal signed was a memorandum. China Energy Investment Corp. Is no more forthcoming. It declined to Appalachian Mountain Advocates, a nonprofit public interest law and policy organization, sued West Virginia University after it declined a November 2017 Freedom of Information Act request to release the deal documents, a list of projects under consideration, and any correspondence related to China. A West Virginia Circuit Court denied the request, saying the document trove could contain proprietary. Appalachian Mountain Advocates declined to comment for this story, citing the ongoing litigation. The case's current senior Joe Manchin, too. Not everyone shares Manchin's skepticism. Capito Thrasher, who is running to unseat Justice as governor, believes, perhaps unsurprisingly, a gubernatorial change could breathe new life into the deal. McKinley says neither the value of the raw materials underneath the state nor China's need for them has changed. China appears to be keeping its options open, even as the trade delegations. The deal's stagnation is a disappointment for West Virginia. But as a microcosm, the current deal is structured as a series of memoranda of understanding that will cover separate topics, all governed by the negotiated enforcement mechanism. Asked by a report, in his just months after the West Virginia deal was announced, Justice told constituents the deal would happen because of Trump. CNBC's Stephanie Debye, Eunice Yoon, and Erica Wright contributed reporting.
Raindrop, drop top, top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up